You go back to the 80s and 90s, I don't think there was a more lucrative time for Hollywood, the entertainment industry, the parks industry, the travel industry, right? Well, they've gotten to this point where they decided they wanted to literally chop off one limb to save another when there was no reason. It's like chopping off your leg to save your arm.
Renegade Online.
Turns out that linear has not died. Disney wants to hasten that because Disney wants to take all the pie. And so the way that this is happening is Disney saying to them, hey, we're both your provider and your competitor. And if you want us to provide to you, we're going to have to make you unable to compete with us. And that's just an untenable position for a company like DirecTV. But this is why I don't understand. You know, they caved completely, Disney that is, to Charter. So they caved completely there. There was some kind of leverage that they could not manipulate, whereas DirecTV, they seem ready to go to bat. I don't understand why the linear providers did not band together in some way to take on these content creators and say, listen, we're going to cut the bundling because that is what you're destroying us with. It's what you've sidestepped. Well, we're contractually stuck with it. We're grandfathered into this, and you're sending us out the way of the dodo.
I think the bigger problem is that you already have Warner and Disney and certain other companies, like I was just saying, so invested already in these companies. But you're 100% right. Like, I've never seen anything like this in the history of business, right? Where you have had because I brought this up to like Script Doctor and a few other people inside the industry before too, and they somewhat agree with me, or, you know, basically agree with a variation thereof of what I was saying with it. But basically what I'm saying is, like, you go back to the 80s and 90s, I don't think there was a more lucrative time for Hollywood, the entertainment industry, the parks industry, the travel industry, all those sorts of things up through 9/11, basically. If you look at it as far as like, if you had a movie or a television show or what have you, there was so many ways of making a movie. Like, and Matt Damon did that great, that Hot Ones or whatever the hell it's called show, where he brought this specific point up too, was like, even back in the day, you could make a movie, right? And even if it didn't make all its money back at the box office, you knew you would make your money back on the video sales, the video on demand, which was pay-per-view back then through your cable company. And then eventually you'd get your HBO nugget, and then you get your network nugget, right? So all those nuggets would come together and it would make a movie profitable at the end of the day, regardless. And not only that, it would give a movie at least a 3 to 4 year window of life, sometimes 5 once you factor in the syndicated window as well, which is the last window after that, right? And sell-through tapes and all that other kind of stuff that would go with back in the day. Same thing goes with television here, right? Television used to be the main market for everybody's entertainment, right? And the studios, instead of wanting to keep that as part of their major, you know, like, this is our rock, this is our base, streaming should be an extension of that. And I think you were bringing this very point up a little bit ago too, Valiant, with like the HBO point, right? Like how you used to have the app and you had the network itself on television. Right. Well, they've gotten to this point where they decided they wanted to literally chop off one limb to save another when there was no reason. It's like chopping off your leg to save your arm. Right? Like, that's what it feels like. I mean, that's the best way I can explain it, because it absolutely makes no sense to me financially. It's like, who the hell talked you into this? Well, it's like, let's kill the theaters. F it. We don't need them. It's like, oh, no, you don't need that $300 million up front? That you're like, no, okay. Sorry,
the opening salvo to the entire economy that you generate the ecosystems of these franchises. By the way,
exactly.
I'll tell you,
and that feeds down through the parks and everything else. Yeah, go ahead, Valiant.
It was an easy sell at the time. Think about when it happened, 2020. It was an easy sell at the time to try to convince people that what's happening right now in 2020, this is never going to get better. It's never going to end. And we best just eat this now. Nobody's going to go back and ever get together in large groups, or it's going to be a decade before it happens. So we better pivot everything to streaming and just go that route. And then it was reinforced by Wall Street. It was reinforced by actual numbers. If we remember, and just bring this down for a second, if you remember at the time, Wall Street was clamoring for subs, right? They saw what was happening with Netflix. They saw the subscriber growth. They saw Netflix, a streaming side, on trajectory for profitability in pretty short order, but Netflix was already fairly mature at that point. Netflix also seemed to have a little bit better control on, the costs, especially if you broke it down by the average show. But then when you saw things like subscriptions for streaming services, subscriptions for gaming services, gaming itself, everything was skyrocketing, the stay-at-home economy, right? So the idea is that given the trajectory of how fast this is going, and we don't know when we'll ever see theaters open again. It might be a year, it might be 2 years, it might be never. Who knows? And when they reopen, and this was the key part, when they reopen, who's going to go back? Who's going to be the first studio that really wants to dip their toe in the water, right? That's going to throw a $200 million production into a movie theater and then nobody shows up? Or do we start selling this right now to streaming services? Or do we dump it on our own new proprietary streaming service, right? And I think a lot of people out there did not understand the acquisition costs. Wall Street certainly didn't understand the acquisition costs. How much it would cost when they saw, hey, you got 10 million new subscribers this quarter, but you spent this much to get them. Or you spent this much on producing content. And remember, a lot of that content was already, like we've talked about, it was already made. It was already meant to go into a theater. Now they were just basically taking the cost of that content and the marketing budget for it that they would have spent trying to put it into theaters and now attributing that to the streaming services. This is what happened to Disney. It's what happened to Paramount. It's what happened to Peacock. It's what happened to Warner Brothers. Happened to all of them. Now, Disney was more pronounced, obviously, because Disney's problem was that unlike Warner Brothers and Paramount and Peacock or Universal, rather, and all these other guys, who would maybe make, a couple big budget productions every year, like 150, 200 million, like real big, maybe 3, right? Disney was making 7. And that was the difference. Those all had to get absorbed into Disney Plus, and that's what sunk Disney Plus. So but that was the idea. That was the promise. It's going to get so big so fast that
they basically made the .com mistake.
Exactly. It was the .com
because
bubble.
that's where I brought up 9/11. Well, really, it wasn't 9/11 because 9/11 was actually a peak for home video and cable and all that kind of consumption. Because that's what people stayed home.
Right.
They didn't travel for about a year or two, and that's when people started buying into home theaters and all this other kind of stuff and building up their DVD library and whatnot. So then at that same period is what you had was the .com bubble, where you had Warner Brothers and all these other companies being bought up by, America Online and all this other shit. And they really weren't worth what they were worth.
You mean AOL Time
AOL
Warner?
Time Warner, exactly.
You've got mail.
Yeah.
By the way, let's not forget
You're
that
gonna fail.
all of this is clear in retrospect. But at the time, there was a huge effort by the industry to take out AMC during all of that.
Yep.
And if that domino had fallen, then they could have had tremendous power over the theater industry. It would have been in shambles. And of all the oddities of the past years, one of the strangest things has got to be that a group of Redditors and a subreddit called Wall Street Bets joined together to attempt to save GameStop, but also AMC. And by golly, those crazies may have actually saved the theater industry as we know it. How weird is that?
Well, you're probably right. And
they did.
And I just want to say real quick, Valiant, like one thing at the time, and I think you even agreed with me at that time, Valiant, and there was a few others who laughed at me. Other people did, but I said it when things first started cracking down like that. I'm like, look, the studios are going to learn that they need the theaters a hell of a lot more than the theaters need them. And everybody laughed at me. They're like, oh, bullshit. And I'm like, no, think about it for a minute. They will find a way to move on. They will find a way to succeed and survive. Okay. The studios, on the other hand, they're going to look at themselves and going, wait, we just shot ourselves in the foot. And that's exactly what they've been learning the last, 2-3 years now, Valiant, is, oh shit, now we screwed up. We have conditioned the audience that if they just wait a month or two, they know they can see this thing on streaming. Right. How the hell do we combat that? Well, the only way they can combat that is by putting more bigger, expensive movies in theaters, in the IMAX and the 3Ds and all the avatars and the twisters and all this, and they've gotten themselves so deep and down into the,
and then give them 90 days.
And then give them 90 days.
Yeah.
So they're going right back, as we've said before, to the old standard that they used to have, because they learned quickly that, oh shit, we kind of used to make money this way.
Yeah, it's irreplaceable, right? And again, and this is, I think, one of the reasons why Hollywood hated David Zaslav, because he was such a contrarian on that. Remember when he came in 2 years ago, early 2022, right? Theaters had really just reopened for maybe 6 months by the time he took over full command, May of 22. And the first earnings call that he did was one of the biggest live shows, probably the biggest live show we had up to that point. I think we had almost 3,000 people watching us for that live show for Warner Brothers, that earnings call. And Zaslav came out there, guns blazing. Him and J.B. Perret are like, you know, this whole idea about collapsing the entire run window for a given production into dump it all on streaming is the stupidest thing we've ever heard of. And that's pretty much almost exactly like he said it. And he was like, and it just, I think Wall Street was just shocked. Like, wait, what did he say? And it was funny because it wasn't long after that, within the next few months of him pounding away at that, you saw the turn in Wall Street about, oh, you know, maybe having all these subscribers really doesn't mean a whole lot since there's no profit.
And let me give you
maybe we should do that first.
Yeah. Well,
let me give you one more dot to connect, guys. If you're curious why Disney might be interested in tanking DirecTV and taking their subscribers with these special deals, for those of you just joining the show, and this is really crazy, that DirecTV, as Disney strangles them, Disney is simultaneously saying, hey, DirecTV subscribers, if you quit today and join us, we'll give you Hulu Live for $30 or whatever off. And they're really doing that.
Yeah.
Here's why Disney might be interested. Since Disney has taken over Hulu, throughout 2024, Hulu Plus Live TV has lost about 100,000 subscribers. Now that's diminishing the value of Hulu Live dramatically, and it's one of the reasons Disney wants Hulu is because, well, guess what? It puts them back into that direct competition with Charter, Comcast, DirecTV, etc. Meanwhile, YouTube TV has suddenly taken off again and is now the fastest growing live TV streaming service with 6.5 million subscribers. So if you're Disney, YouTube not only overtook you in terms of overall content creation for televisions, but they're also winning dramatically now against Hulu. And if you're Disney, you're looking at this and saying, how can we bump up our subscribers quickly? Let's take out DirecTV.
Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.